Wednesday! No, that's still cliche. Working on intros, but there's no good way to introduce a YouTube video. It's always cliche no matter what you do. Unless you just start talking, and then that's kind of awkward. I will try that, though. Maybe just start talking. Yeah, so, this video was one that I've been struggling with how to do, because I know YouTube is likely going to demonetize it just because of the subject matter. So if you like this kind of stuff as opposed to the easy, like, let's fight over TV shows and movies that are totally safe, but get people oddly worked up anyway, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. The stuff going on with heartbeat bills and challenges to Roe versus Wade, it's very serious, and I don't want to get into those challenges specifically because I'm not a lawyer, I'm not American, so in terms of the constitutionality of these various bills, I'd be talking about out my ass. I don't know. It's more a question of, is this moral and is this right? And there's the issue of the pro-life versus pro-choice debate. People are so entrenched that it's hard to get any movement on it. Thing is, we collectively treat this debate around, dirty word, abortion, the word around abortion. We treat it as some unique assault on people's bodies and the right to choose their fates. I'm specifically saying people because I actually read an article over the weekend about the issues that trans men face when they want to have babies. So it's not just women who are having babies anymore. What a world. The thing is, though, this pro-life, pro-choice, women's right to choose, women's right to have control over their body debate is really just the extreme end of a spectrum of ways that culture undermines individual autonomy through our bodies and through judgments on the morality of what people do with their bodies. And this is something that I've struggled with for a while. The various portrayals of women, the good girls versus the bad girls, and some women deserve it. But there's also stuff going on with men in this regard too, and I think this is more overlooked. The idea of a dad bod being a guy letting themselves go is a new thing. It is something of a form of cuddly body shaming. I don't think that it should be seen as somehow bad if a guy, once he becomes a father, decides there's things that are more important than how he looks. And the idea that the dad bod is something you should eventually reclaim yourself from, I have an issue with that, because that's how someone wants to look and how someone is comfortable looking is a very personal thing. And for decades, feminism has decried the idea that women are subjected to too much scrutiny. And it seems that instead of easing off that, men are just being subjected to more scrutiny. This idea that everybody needs to look like a bodybuilder, that's nonsense. A lot of people, myself included, don't even really like that movie superhero look. So it's not across the board. It sends a false message. But when you start making people fixated on their physical forms, it limits their aspirations. It limits what they think they could do, because there's only so many hours in a day. And if people are spending a huge amount of time in the gym and eating low carb, because the headaches from low carb, woo, they are no joke. But, you know, sorry, my nose is running, guys. I don't know what's going on. But this idea that, you know, everything a woman does with her body is questioned somehow. You know, you're too modest, you're not modest enough, you're overlooked, you get the wrong kind of attention, you know, that is well documented. But there are a lot of things that have been, I don't know, smacking me in the head a lot lately. I don't know what the universe is trying to tell me, but this idea that if you have a male body, you know, or fulfill the male gender role in society, you are somehow supposed to physically and or emotionally and or mentally sacrifice yourself somehow for the greater good, the greater whole, this sort of, you know, wartime ethic that hasn't totally gone away. And I have a real issue with that. I find it extremely dehumanizing. I think that any job should be just that, a job. Whether it's military service or whether it's, you know, MMA fighting or boxing or prostitution or anything like that. Any job that comes with a certain amount of physical peril, it is just that, a job. It is no different than, say, you know, construction work or, you know, working as a cook, because those knives, you can lose a finger that way. You know, anything physical, there's physical risk, but, you know, nobody tells a carpenter, well, you knew you might lose your arm when you signed up. And that male disposability, I know us feminists are not supposed to talk about male disposability. I'm not quite sure why, because it's the other side of the gendered coin. And of course, if there's inequalities on one side of the binary, then, you know, the other side of the binary is going to have negative trade-offs as well. That just tends to be how scales work, right? And we are living in an age where people are uniquely concerned about what other people do with themselves, you know, in terms of gendered expression. There's like a very narrow window of what's considered normal. And, you know, for men, if you step outside that realm of normalcy, you're toxic masculinity, or you're effeminate, you know, you're a pussy or something like that. Or you're like, you know, there's so many ways, hitting the sweet spot of sufficiently bearded but not too bearded, sufficiently skinny jeaned but not too skinny jeaned, you know, don't look menacing but don't seem completely milquetoast either. That is a lot to keep up. And, you know, women similarly, we're in this sort of Spanx locked in paradigm where nobody should be wearing Spanx every day. I mean, yeah, you can look smoother in a clingier dress, but man, that stuff is not comfortable, and yikes, won't go there. But we are extremely body conscious to a negative degree, and seeing the way people freak out on depictions of nudity in media, the way YouTube demonetizes any woman who is willing to make comedy or something else with what she got. This is all, and then the presumption of predator as some sort of default state, and that is not as common across the board. I guess no, it is sort of culturally enforced in the Me Too era, but all these things are tactics that allow society to control the individual based on assumptions about our bodies, and they all take away from our ability to actualize our authentic selves, and it's not right. And I think we need to broaden this debate on pro-life, pro-choice, women's right to choose is between her and her doctor. We really need to broaden that to be a wider discussion of there are a lot of things that are not society's business. Moments like that are extremely vulnerable. We need to talk more about conscious living and making choices, dignity of risk idea. You make someone aware of the potential risks of their choices and let them make their choices. The dire consequences for offending, online society are ridiculous. The public shamings are ridiculous. And that's part of the reason I've just been really fuck it of late. People do not have the right to tell other people what opinions they're allowed to hold, within reason. Disagreeing on a movie is not a problem. It really isn't. No, it's not. And the fact that people go so crazy about stuff is a real sign of the times. But this is all social policing. This is all tight moral licensing, and it matters. It matters in a way that we don't fully comprehend. And the Christian paradigm regarding when life begins, being forced on people of all religions and no religions, is a real affront to liberty, especially since, the founders of America, there were a lot of deists in there who didn't subscribe to that stuff. And, other religions, mine is pretty, they're pretty clear that it's right in Jewish commentary. A child is part of the mother's body until the head leaves the body. Now, Judaism is a very old religion. Infant mortality was a much bigger deal than the right to life. And so somebody wasn't considered a full person until they were named 8 days after their birth because infant mortality was so high. So that wasn't a concern when those laws were laid down. And the idea was to make it seem like the unborn, because miscarriages were so common, and stillborns were so common, the idea of making that a death was far too hard on the woman. The other thing that's significant is that things like abortion and prostitution and prize fighting and, sell swords and people selling their bodies or doing things that are considered amoral to some, these things have been around in some way or another for most of human history. Criminalizing a woman's right to control her medical privacy does not reduce this stuff. It simply makes it less safe and more traumatic in a different way. Women were exploited a lot by their doctors when abortion was illegal. And I personally, those are the things that I care about, since criminalizing it didn't stop it. Watch the movie Dirty Dancing. There's a pre-Roe versus Wade abortion subplot in that movie. No, really, it does. If you were really young when you watched it, you might not have known what was going on, but that was in there. Even Into the Badlands had like a moment where the widow made it clear to, what's his name? Toilet paper outfit guy, that she was going to choose for herself things like that, not the male opinion. And that's another controversial part, right? Why doesn't the man get a say? And this is where I get a bit old-fashioned, because I think that everyone involved in a potential relationship should have a chance to make their intentions for the relationship, what they're looking for out of life, known. And that matters. So, if a guy wants to have a family one day, that's an important thing to sort out very early in a relationship. And of course, we're talking about exclusively heterosexual couples here because, same-sex couples accidentally getting pregnant isn't an issue. Sorry, I should say cisgendered same-sex couples. The time to talk about that stuff is before you get physically involved. If you want to do the hookups, do the booty calls, there are plenty of very effective ways to prevent pregnancy. Use them. All this stuff is really, at the end of the day, about communication and self-respect. And if a guy really wants to make sure he gets a say in what a woman does that way, then stick to committed relationships, because that's the way you get a say beforehand. You get it, in sort of a common agreement, and people can change their minds. There are issues there, but I want to have kids. I don't. Okay, we're not well suited for each other. Or I want to have kids in the next 3 years. I really don't. I'm working on my career. Okay, you don't want the same things out of life. But these are the sorts of discussions that adults have before they enter into a relationship. No, really, we do. These are discussions, and life does change. God knows my life did not go the way I thought it would in that regard. But this is why it's important to have the discussion, so that you can then reassess when things change. You don't just go into it with no plan. That's not responsible. And I think that if we actually shifted this to a paradigm of self-respect and recognizing that people are more than our bodies. And I'm sure people are going to twist this every way from sideways, but I am so used to that right now. All you haters have done is just make me not care. And it's kind of liberating. I'm still figuring out what I want to do with this fresh perspective. I'm not sure I completely like it, but it is pretty freeing. I think that people are more than their bodies. They are their hearts and their minds as well. And if anything, legislation, social pressure, anything doesn't treat a person like a whole person, you're just treating them as a vessel for another life, or some sort of human shield that is expected to throw themselves on a grenade for the greater good. That's not right. That's not individualism. That's not treating people like people. And those paradigms need to be reassessed. So if you like this sort of stuff, because this is probably going to get demonetized, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. Thanks for watching.